But Trump and these policies, and I want to say it's not just Trump, it's his enablers. You know, they are following the racist playbook of the rising tide of color against white world supremacy that was written in 1920 by the Stoddard. They are following the white Southern strategy, Lee Atwater and Kevin Phillips. They're following it to a T.
All right, friends, I want to be constructive rather than destructive today. My goal is not to boost ratings, boost views, boost clicks. My goal is to glorify Jesus. My goal is to glorify the Lord, to edify the church, to challenge us to step higher and not get caught up in the spirit of the world, in the spirit of the age, in the name calling, in the attacking mode. Now, I may get lots of amens from many of you, and I may get lots of groans and Mike and Dr. Brown and, oh, come on. Maybe I'm hitting a nerve, and maybe that's the cause of the reaction. Now, the subject of racism is constant right now in the news media, especially since President Trump went after Representative Elijah Cummings. And his attack about what's happening in the city of Baltimore. That's a racist attack. How dare you do that? And then others, black Democrats in Baltimore, saying, what are you talking about? This is an accurate description of what's happening in our city, and we're glad the president's saying something about it. And you've got things swirling all around, and it seems everybody is playing the race card. As I have done my best to analyze things, to prayerfully consider issues, recognizing that we all have blind spots, recognizing that we all are colored to some degree by our background, by our upbringing, by our experiences, right? We have to acknowledge that, which means that we have to stay open. We have convictions that we're willing to die for, the hills that we're willing to die on. And there are other things where we listen, we learn, we grow, all right? I have people close to me that believe Donald Trump is a racist and that they believe that he is destroying the country and no amount of good he's doing can help. I have other people that believe that Donald Trump is doing a great job and that any charges of racism against him are completely unfounded and it's just another game that's being played to hurt him, all right? These are, on both sides, people close to me who have my ear, all right? Some say he's doing so much destruction. Doesn't matter how much good that he's done in other ways. Doesn't matter. And I have other people say he's doing so much good. All these other charges are just false attacks against him. And I pray and I listen and I seek to learn. I concluded some years ago that in America, white Americans, I'm speaking broadly, often do not see racism when it is there. All right? White Americans often do not see racism when it is there. And black Americans often see racism when it is not there. And I think it's understandable, given different history, different background, different experience, that this often happens. All right, so Reverend William Barber, I've reached out to him a number of times to interact, challenge things that he said. He's never responded, so he's not aware I've reached out to him, or he's declined to have any interaction, public or private. But he comes back from the border. He's moved by what he sees. He wants to do something to better the conditions at the border. And from my perspective, as he's accusing white evangelicals, why the attack on white evangelicals? Where did that come from? Fair question here. But in my mind, he is playing the very race card that he's accusing the president and, quote, his enablers of playing. From what I can tell, both sides are playing a race card in one way or another. That there are critics, there are extremes on both sides, and both sides playing the race card. There are some that say it's impossible for a black American to be racist, that's only something that someone in a superior position can do, and that's the white society. There's a recent poll with 32% of Democrats feel that any criticism, say, of a black politician leader is racist. So you've got these extreme views on all sides. And what I'm saying is this: we as God's people must do better. We as God's people must step higher. So Joe Scarborough, Morning Joe, he has a guest on, Walter Isaacson, and they're talking about coming together in white evangelicals, acts of compassion to help the needy, to help the poor, to help the underprivileged, etc. Listen to this interaction.
I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, and it's so interesting that even 15 years ago, during Hurricane Katrina, there were caravans of white evangelicals going over. They'd go over with us every day. We'd do our show, Scarborough Country, over there every night for about a month, it seemed. And there were white evangelicals who got off of work, who stopped their worlds to help people who were suffering in Louisiana and Mississippi. And I'm glad to hear that there's some out right now in El Paso, but you do have to wonder what's happened with at least the leaders of the church that seem to be ignoring the teachings of Jesus through the parable of the Good Samaritan, or the Beatitudes, or the Sermon on the Mount, or Matthew 25, starting at verse 31. You wonder what's happened to those red letter evangelicals.
I don't wonder what's happened to them. They're all over the place. Why are we looking at a few public voices as if that represents everyone? As if a public white voice or a public black voice represents everyone? How would my black Christian friends feel if I took the words of Reverend Al Sharpton and thought that represents you? Or Reverend William Barber said that represents all of you? It's just as wrong when you have a prominent white evangelical leader who says something and that somehow represents all white evangelicals. I work with white evangelicals and black and Hispanic evangelicals, but all over the country and all over the world. Good friends in different countries. One of my dearest friends in the world, brown-skinned Indian from India. So everybody I know, I work with, they have multiracial congregations, or they work in multiracial leadership teams. They work jointly across denominations. They work jointly across race, across ethnicity. The white evangelicals I know that are in inner city context or in multiracial context are very heavily given to multiracial ministry and church unity based on multiracial expression, and are serving the poor and the hurting. And they're not just pro-life fighting for the baby in the womb, they're fighting for the child outside the womb. And they're involved in educational process or job fairs or things like, it's just common what we do. So there's this caricature being put forward. There's this notion as if, oh no, the white evangelical, what's happened to them? They're out doing what they've done all along, side by side with black evangelicals and others. That hasn't changed. But somehow in the midst of this call to work together to bring about good, this is what Reverend Barber has to say. Clip number 3.
I want to say something about this white evangelicalism, though, and why it's a problem, but there's always been another stream as well. This traces back to slaveholder religion. This is not new in America, where religion was used to justify slavery, justify segregation, when white evangelicals decided to be white and not evangelical. True evangelicalism starts with addressing issues of poverty and injustice, both in word and in structure. I'm an evangelical, so I don't understand this theological malpractice where you claim to be evangelical, but you don't say anything about the poor and structures of poverty and racism.
See, to me, that was theological malpractice. To say I'm an evangelical and then to launch accusations and bring up slaveholder religion based on a caricature that you presented. Look, there are white evangelicals actively working to help situations at the border. But if people say, hey, look, we're a nation of laws and we just can't let anybody in, that doesn't mean you're racist or anything like that. So I find this rhetoric, just like I found the president's rhetoric unhelpful with his tweets about Representative Cummings. Okay, address the issues in Baltimore. Address the issues in Baltimore. Liberals like Bernie Sanders have talked about the issues in Baltimore. Democrats have talked about other inner city issues. Address the issues, but in a way that's not going to open you up to charges of racism. And then address the issues here, Reverend Barber, without bringing up slaveholder religion. All this stuff is inflammatory. It's unnecessary, and it's on all sides. So Ben Carson comes on Tucker Carlson to say, look, I stand with the president. I stand with Representative Cummings. And Baltimore has some real needs. And look, I know as a surgeon that I helped a lot of these kids from real bad situations, housing situations and other things. And I was reluctant to send them back. Listen to what he said.
As a pediatric neurosurgeon, I spent many hours, sometimes operating all night long, trying to give children of Baltimore and other places around the world a second chance at life. And usually we were successful, but a few days later I was in a horrible dilemma because some of those kids had to go back into homes in East Baltimore that were infested with rats and roaches and ticks and mold and lead and violence. And I didn't want to send them back. Sometimes I would even consider, extra tests so they could stay in the hospital an extra day or two.
All right, so how about we do this? Ben Carson, as the president, would you work with Representative Cummings to improve things in Baltimore? Yes. Hopefully Representative Cummings will say the same thing. How about we transcend the rhetoric? I don't care where it's coming from. I don't care where it's coming from. Liberal media, the White House, black leader, white leader, I don't care. How about that we step higher? How about that we follow the admonition of Jesus to be peacemakers? How about we sit down with people who are not the same color, not the same ethnicity, part of the same body of Christ, and say, hey, share your perspective with me. Let me share yours. And what can we do together to bring positive change through the gospel and help hurting people and glorify Jesus? How can we learn from each other, listen to each other, and come together to make positive change? Is that too much to ask?